Welcome to the Learning Zone with Miss Beachley, Miss Hall, and Miss Bates.
Okay, boys and girls, happy Tuesday. Today is Crazy Sock Day. I am wearing my crazy socks. Let me see if I can get them up in the camera. If you know what book are these crazy socks from, let me know in the comments. There's a clue if you've been following along in my class on my class dojo. So today we are going to complete a summary of the story Grace for President, which comes out of our literature anthology. Our agenda for today is that we're going to work on our phonics practice. You should have done that already. If not, you can do that at the end of this lesson. We're going to watch the instructional video, and during this instructional video, we're going to be reading that first read of the story Grace for President, which comes out of our literature anthology. After we complete that first read of Grace for President, and I show you a couple ways to take notes while you're reading, we're going to be writing a summary together of the story Grace for President. After we've done that, it's your responsibility to answer our respond to reading question and post on our class discussion board for today. So in order for you to remember the important events that occur in a story, it can be helpful after reading to write a summary. Summarizing means that we're putting those most important events that happen in the story in the order that they occurred. So for example, if I was telling a story about the time that I broke my leg, I wouldn't want to start with, well, I got a cast on my leg, because that wouldn't have happened until the end of the story. It could spoil, for somebody who's hearing that story, the order that it actually happened. I want to show you a very quick method of taking notes that can help you write a summary at the end of your story. We're going to start by splitting our paper or our note catcher or whatever we're using into 4 sections. In those sections, I want you to write characters, setting, which is where those events are taking place, problem, and sometimes you might uncover more than one problem, and solution. As you're reading, you should be taking notes about who the characters are in the story and where the story events are taking place, what the problems that these characters are facing, and how those problems ultimately get resolved. So let me model for you how I would fill out this organizer using the Lost Kitten. Okay, so I filled out my story map for the Lost Kitten. This is something that you can typically do during that first read of your story. So I've listed out the main characters and the order that I found them in the story, where the story mostly took place, the problem, which was that Sally had lost her kitten Boots, and the solution was that the neighborhood had to come together to help find the lost kitten. So when I'm writing a summary and I'm putting these important events in order, it's really important that I think about what these main characters really wanted. We know that Sally wanted to find her kitten, but if we remember from yesterday's story, it really wasn't Sally who was telling the story. The main characters was the narrator Pam and her friend Cora, and what they really wanted to do was help Sally find her lost kitten. So what I can do to tell a summary of this story is I can put it in order using the method somebody, wanted, but, so, then. And when I'm thinking about that, I really want to hone in and think about what did that main character want. So we've talked about what a summary is, why summaries are important. Now let's look at this summary that I've written for the Lost Kitten. So if we remember correctly, our main characters were Pam and Cora. And Pam and Cora wanted to help find the lost kitten. I think this is probably the most important part about writing a summary. When we're putting those events in order, we want it to always come back to what did that main character want? Because that's going to help us decide if this event was important enough to put it in our summary. So Pam and Cora wanted to help find the lost kitten, but they couldn't do it by themselves. So they had to make a plan, and all the neighbors had to help look for the cat. That ended up being the solution. Because all the neighbors helped look for the cat, then they found Boots the cat and returned him to Sally. If you can see, I've included about 4 or 5 important events in the story using this somebody wanted but so then method. We're going to be using that today while we read the story Grace for President. We're going to be writing a summary. We want to think about these key points. We want to think about who is the main character, what is the main thing that she wants, what are those obstacles in her way, how does the character respond to or solve that problem, and how does it end up? We want to think back to the problem. Was the problem fully solved? So we're going to go into our first reading of Grace for President. During this reading, remember we're reading and using our close reading steps. We're reading to get that basic information. We're going to mark up those texts and find what the story was mostly about, and use a graphic organizer like the one I showed you on the board to remember what those key events and important things that were happening in the story was. I want you to pause this video and I want you to get into that story, Grace for President, either digitally on Google Classroom or using the paper version that's in your packet. So I used this quadrant system story map to map out my first reading of Grace for President. So as I read in my story, and because I have the actual book, I couldn't mark it up. But if you're using digital or paper version, you can mark it and write in the margins. I wrote just a few characters. There was many more characters in the story, and you should have 2 or 3 more listed on your journal. I wrote at the setting, which was the school. The problem, when I thought about the problem, I wanted to think about what that main problem was. If I had more space, and you could do this in your journal, you could write out multiple problems. So I said that nobody thought that Grace would win because Thomas was just more popular. And then when we're thinking about the solution, it might not be what happens at the very end of the story. It might be how that character had to solve that problem. So in this case, Grace had to work harder to solve her problem. And I looked back in this text and I found spots where it said that that's what she had to do. She had to listen to people's issues and make campaign promises. After you've done all of this, we want to go back and we want to think about how we're going to put these events and the other events that happened in the story in order to tell what happened in the story in our own words. Because that's our ultimate goal for the lesson today, which is for us to write a summary. Okay, so now that I've showed you how I mapped out the story Grace for President and we've completed our first read of the story, I want to get into this main thing. When we're writing summaries and we're putting these important events in order, the most important thing that we're thinking about is what did this character really want? So in the story Grace for President, what was it that Grace really wanted? I want you to jot it down in your journal or on your student note catcher. I said it was she really wanted to be president. And I looked back in my text actually to find that on page 391 where it said, I've been thinking it over and I'd like to be president. But uh-oh, here comes the problem. Several students start to laugh. So I can look back on my story map and I can think about this problem. Well, nobody thought that Grace would win because Thomas was more popular. They laughed at her. They didn't think it was a good idea for a girl to be president. So I want to think about all of these events that happened in the story using my notes and going back in the text, and I want to put it in this order. Somebody wanted, but, so, then. And you can write these right alongside your page, and you can fill in and answer these questions. Who was the main character? What was the main thing that she wanted? And then when we think about those obstacles is another word for problems. What were the problems that stood in her way? And then often the solution is how the character responded to or solved that problem. That's our so. And then we want to think about what happens at the end of the story. We want to go all the way back to that problem and what they wanted. How did the story end? What happened at the very end of the story? So I've mapped out some key important events for this story. And if you're using the student note catcher, you can put these in order on the digital version, or you can use them in your journal and you can write them out next to somebody wanted but so and then. Once we put them in order, so for example, I can move Grace over here to somebody because she was the main character. Once we put them in order, we can write out that summary and we have a beautiful new summary. So that's all I have for you today. We're going to go into our next steps, which are use your graphic organizer to summarize Grace for President in your journal or digitally. Respond to the question on your assignment or in your journal. What was the problem Grace faced during her campaign? And what did she have to do to prove that she should be president? Check in on our discussion board and respond to the question there. And then you're going to complete page 207 in the Your Turn practice book. As always, I've assigned extra wonders practice for you to do today, and don't forget that you should be doing 15 minutes of iReady reading a day. I hope you have a great afternoon. I hope you enjoyed learning in your crazy socks, and I will see you tomorrow.